Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the stream. So for those that are new, I've been giving the spiel every stream. I'm getting pretty good at it by this point, but my husband and I have been working on a game engine in C++ by hand, excuse me, for about 5 or 6 years, just for fun. And in this series of streams, what we are doing is we are working on making a commercial game project with it for the very first time. And we're not using LLMs as part of this project, and you can watch my other streams for my take on that to save going into detail on it each time. So watch us if you are interested in C++ or game development, or specifically the genre we're working on will be a dungeon crawler CRPG compressed into a 30-minute multiplayer deck builder experience. So spanning a couple different genres there, and if you're curious how we're gonna pull that off, yeah, catch us every other day-ish or so. So a little bit more on format. My husband's been working on the back end. He has been doing the networking and the systems integration for it's a deck builder, so things like card draw, and he just made a fix to the engine itself rather than the game for random number generating and shuffling. And then I've been working on going from the outside in. So I've been working on the UI, and then I'll be doing art and assets and such. So going from the front end and integrating back. So specifically, last couple of streams, what I have been doing, let me pull up my live again. So for the last couple of streams, I have been working on, started with the main menu, then I moved into the class selection menu, and now I've been working on the primary game scene menu. So we did this one. It allows you to choose a party you can invite. It's integrated with Steam, so you can invite your Steam friends, create a lobby or join a lobby, and then once you start a game, we did the class selection menu last week. And this week we've been working on prototyping what happens when you actually get into the game. And I'm just about wrapped up with how far I wanted to take this specific MR for the UI here. And none of this this isn't production UI, this is just a functional prototype level UI. Because the idea is get to the point where we can play the entire game. And then once we're there, we can know we don't have to make any big design changes. And then I can start finalizing assets and art and such. So let's give you a brief tour of what we have here. The cards will be displayed here when they get drawn. Here will be the logs. This is the party menu. And when we click on the eye button, it will focus that specific player's stats here in the right hand side. Hi Anurag Shandelia, welcome to the stream. I love your videos. I'm also into dev, and I find all of your videos very good. Thank you. That really means a lot to me. It was absolutely wild to get to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you all very much. I was not expecting to get to 1,000 subscribers so quickly, and I have been refreshing YouTube like every 15 minutes to see if we get to 1,000, and we did. So that's really means a lot. Thank you all. All right, so what we have here, we have the party menu, and this is all done in Dear MGUI. And my vision here is to make production level MGUI graphics, or production level UI with MGUI, and it's absolutely feasible. This isn't production level, this is just quick little hack together images and buttons. Each of these things took me less than 5 minutes to make in Photoshop. But the point of the functional prototype is, can we get the game completely playable from beginning to end so that we can work through any kinks to know that we're not going to be wasting any time spent with finalizing assets. All right, so when you click on anyone in the party, you'll pull up their party-specific stats. None of these menus are hooked up yet, and I'll probably dive into the runes menu right away in the next PR. Then we have equipment level up menu in the settings. Then you see here we have our details pane down below, and anything you hover over will be shown here. So boots, I was doing this yesterday or this morning. We have weapon, helm, chest piece, boots, and then enemy waves, threads of fate, strength, agility, and intelligence, and then strength tokens, agility tokens, and intelligence tokens, and then status effects here. And then if you notice in the background, we have all this logging. My husband's been working on this. This is phase changes, and then what happens on the start of each phase. And then right now in this instance of the game, we are 1 human player and 3 bots, so they're wired up accordingly to react to the phase changes. So I think I am going to call it, as far as it's kind of interesting. How much do I want to do in the main menu UI as part of the single PR? Before the PR, we didn't have anything but the viewport showing, so this has all of the functional bones in place for the UI elements, and I think it's a good place to cut it. I'm pulling as much information as we currently have from the backend, and then as we get more backend systems, and probably what I'll start right away on is just taking those individual menus and those systems there and expanding them. So now we're on cleanup and test, and to see if I can cut anything out of this controller layer here. So if you've watched some of my other streams, you know that the way I'm doing this is for the UI. We have a main UI controller called UI Manager. And then that UI has a controller and UI class for each of our sub UIs. So we have this manager has a main menu UI, it has a class selection UI, it has a game UI, and then a controller for each one. And then the UI itself, I'll show you the one I'm working on. The UI itself takes in the controller as a dependency, and then the extent of the screen, and from there it can do everything it needs to do, with my design intention here being that the UI really only has to worry about presentation, about view concerns. So it knows it needs to draw an image, but it doesn't care what that image is or how that image is served. It just goes to the controller, it gets the image, and it needs to serve up stats, so it cares about how it's going to space and align the items, but it really doesn't care how those items are calculated. Or if we look at some of the controller behind the scenes, the UI doesn't care if we're in a game before we try to get the game instance. So all of that's abstracted away to the controller, and then what I'm going to do tonight is add tests for that controller level. And then hopefully get this up for MR for code review. But the one thing I'm going to do is pull my husband's changes in from yesterday here. So let's do I really like to be more disciplined when I'm writing tests about going method by method. So when I'm writing a new method, add it to the tests. But as you'll see here, as I start to write these tests, I don't have any yet for the controller for the game, because almost every one of them is just check for null, or check for are we in game, and then if we are, fetch an object. So are we in the game, fetch an object. Are we in the game, fetch an object. I'm not going to unit test these. There's very little business logic here to test. So the only one I need to really unit test is some of the hovering logic. We want to make sure that I've thought through that appropriately, because we don't want to be trying to access any types that are unused or uninitialized, and we don't want to try to be... I want to make sure that I'm actually only doing these if we haven't hovered. So for example, there are 3 equipment slots. I don't want to run this calculation to go and fetch all this data and allocate a new string every time, every frame that we're hovering the equipment. So I put this, make sure our last hovered thing wasn't this. And if it was this, return early and don't reallocate the string because we're on the same one. I want to test that as well. But first things first, I'm going to get my husband's latest changes and integrate those. be kind of a short stream today. I'm hoping to wrap up the test, but it is every other Saturday we play poker night. Or we play poker and it's poker night at 9 o'clock Central. So I'm going to see what I can get done here in the next 40 minutes or so. That was it. Let's see how we build then with this change. Hi, corporate game designer. Welcome to the stream. Is this the first game using your engine, or has this engine enabled you to develop your games more efficiently? This is our first commercial game with the engine. The other one, we've started a bunch of projects using the engine, but the only one we've actually ever published was just for the let's find it, for the Pirate Software Game Jam back in 2024. Right, let's try to find it. I thought the link was on my YouTube. Maybe it is. Yeah, so we were able to use the engine to make this really fun worm train spore combating game that we made in, if I want to say it was was it a week? It was either 2 weeks, maybe it was 2 weeks. It's been a while actually, since I think it was 2024, 2023 when we did this one. But yeah, so we have made a game, and now we're making a much, much larger game with many more considerations. And as far as the efficiently part, I don't really know it because it's been so long since I've used Unity, but the one thing, so I can't really proclaim it being more efficient than what I would be if I had just been using Unity the entire time. But I will say the one thing that is helpful is I don't like, when I'm developing something, having a big pile of uncertainties in my foundation, and it can actually make me really irritated. I don't know if you guys have experienced such a thing, but if you start working on something that's fairly complex, there's just going to be things that you don't understand yet, so you're going to make assumptions about them. And I can't stand those. I mean, you can't get rid of them entirely, but when I'm working with something like Unity and something doesn't work, it personally drives me crazy, because then I start thinking, oh, I'm an idiot. What else don't I understand? This whole framework doesn't make sense. I'm stuck. I'll have to be reading tutorials for the rest of my life. And that like uncertainty tower is completely gone with the engine because we wrote everything ourselves. So, and even like some of the code my husband wrote, that if it's harder to understand, well, if there's a bug in it, I have to go fix it. So now I have to go understand it. And so the surface area is much smaller. So being able to understand it is within the realm of possibility. And then I don't have this very shaky foundation. I have a very solid foundation. So it's just more enjoyable to write a game or do anything working with the engine than Unity. CWE's Gaming says, hey, welcome to the stream, by the way. I discovered you recently. What you're making looks really cool. Thank you. It's nice to see somebody doing this sort of how I am. I use C++ and Raylib. I have a Mac, so I worry if I use OpenGL due to deprecation. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see your project, by the way. Yeah, us C++ developers unite for making old games the old-fashioned way. Yeah, so we use Diligent Graphics, so I've talked about it quite a bit on the stream before for rendering, but it's kind of an abstraction layer that lets you write in a common language to abstract over all the different graphics APIs. And the guy that wrote it has a very negative opinion on OpenGL because it doesn't, he said, like, it has the most edge cases to try to get a common layer to fit into OpenGL is much more difficult than like DirectX 11 and 12 and Vulkan, for example. But I mean, it depends on what your purposes are, but if you're making a simple renderer, I see no problem with using OpenGL in production. Corporate game designer says, in my day job, there's a thing I call decoy code. The system was actually largely deprecated years ago, but still hanging around, but it's not really used. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so at my day job, I work on legacy desktop software, and it is, if you're wondering how legacy, it is VB.NET. And so I know a lot of, well, I don't call it decoy code, but I know a lot about that, let me tell you. Sounds like you do too. All right. Okay, so we did not build right away. Yeah, so it's going to be this in-game menu. What are we mad about? Okay, so we have the in-game menu UIs here, but we're not initializing it. How did this get resolved? Okay, so should be after the main menu UI. Yeah. Bone Circuits, welcome to the stream, by the way. It says, did I hear VB keep alive 2026? Oh yeah, VB is alive and well. VB is rocking and rolling still. And corporate game designer says, I call it that because a new person will start asking about it. And I'm like, oh no, we don't use that anymore. That's a decoy. Yeah, we have something really fun where in ages past, when we're in WinForms, and if we create a new version of the form for whatever reason, we keep the old one around, and we call the new one exactly what the old one was, but we just put a 2 on it. And we've got a couple 2s and a couple 3s. I've never seen a 4, but yeah, so actually, and I make fun of that, but you guys need to see something because I'm very hypocritical. Check this out. This is our engine. And when I first wrote graphics, I wrote them in Vulkan. And as we started there were, for other reasons I've talked about other streams, we ended up cutting away from, let me make this bigger here. So this is the engine itself, and we have graphics, and this is the old Vulkan API. So we started with DirectX, and then we got rid of that, and then we started a full like initiative to make a graphics renderer. This was my first stab at a graphics renderer, and I wrote it in Vulkan. And then, due to reasons, we decided that we couldn't move forward with this, and we had to make a new graphics library. But we wanted to keep the old one in play because it was a long cutover to make the new one. And then we wanted backwards compatibility. So we did, in fact, call it Graphics 2. So maybe there's something about me that, like, oozes that we should just name the successor of something 2. And, like, that retroactively influenced my predecessors at work. And they knew I was coming, so they knew they should prepare for me by naming things with a 2. All right, so after the merge in-game UI, in-game menu UI, let's first see if this is, okay, so it is a valid class. It needs the engine, the instance manager, and the extent. So let's what's it called? Game menu UI. And we need the engine. We need the instance manager. And we need the extent. Well, let's try that. I'm not the right one to talk to about graphics support on Mac. I've never had a Mac. My husband does, but he doesn't really know, or maybe he does know more about this than me, but so I know that Macs use metal or modern Macs use metal, and you can use Vulkan on a Mac, but you need something called Molten VK, which I don't know if Molten VK is bindings or what, but it's something that can translate Vulkan into metal. But if someone can give a better example or better explanation of that, that's a world that I've just kind of dodged. Okay, so tell me we can't convert all the types, so we need reference, const ref. Let's make sure we're doing that. The engine is a pointer, so we want that. Instance manager is ref, and there should just be the pointer. Deref there. Phoebe is alive. I don't know about well. Yeah. Word. At the start, they deployed something called game sprockets. Think of it like C with lives. OpenGL was the usual alternative through the PPC and Intel era against D3D. It's funny because I was going to be learning on my Linux desktop, but my GPU just crapped out. I'll order into one soon. I suppose while I'm waiting for this to build, I can actually get started on my tests here. So let's make sure. I just want to have a couple light tests for the hover stuff here in the game controller, because I really don't need to test the getters. All right, let's make sure that that's building here. We're still good, and let's see if okay, we should be able to quit to the main menu. Let's try that again. Look at the UI manager. Okay, so that was not how we wanted the game to. Okay, let me stage you all. Okay, so we clobbered some stuff with the auto merge that we didn't want to. I'm gonna go pull up the original PR to make sure I know what exactly that was. Hi, Gadgets. And hi, Mika. Welcome back, both of you. And hi, Hollow Tower. What do y'all think about O-Step? I don't know what O-Step is. And Mika uses BGFX. Yeah, that was the one. I was looking between BGFX and Diligent Engine for picking like that abstraction layer. How are you today, Gadgets? Okay, let's clean you up. Operating systems in 3 easy pieces. Oh. I've not heard of it. And Bone Circuit assumed O-Step was OpenStep. I also haven't heard of OpenStep. Hi, Turnberry. Turnberry says, what's going on here? We all know women can't code. No, who let us sit at the computer? How dare we? We are, what's that term? We're trying to reach beyond our stations. Alright, let's see if that... Okay, main menu, you are not showing up yet. Why? Mode supports in-game menu, so that will be if class selection or play. We should be setting play mode. This merge went really badly. So what I'm doing, and I can just do it here so you guys can see, is I am looking at the PR, figuring out what got clobbered with the auto merge here. I complained horribly about C++ for a really long time because coming from like a .NET background, even though I've been stuck at .NET 4.8 framework for like the last 8 years of my career, even at 4.8 framework, which is like 15 years old now, or 10 years old, it still has so much more built out functionality than like C++ does. And now that we're at C++ 23 and 26, that is getting better. Like the things that I'm used to, like .NET has time functions and like a link and really nice lists and contains, and not to mention like string functions, and it's just much more built out than C++, and that really bugged me for a very long time because I just wanted to find like, give me a contains, but you have to do std find and then compare the iterator pose, and that drove me crazy. But nowadays, with like some of the ranges stuff that came out in 20 and 23, it really is fine to use C++. And I really like explicit memory management. Something about that feels really good. At what point do we get C++? Yeah. Bone Circuit says namespace everything. Yeah, we do a fair amount of namespacing. And then Yaniv, oh hi Yaniv, welcome back. What am I working on today? So today I am wrapping up the UI that I was working on before. So my goal for this MR was to get just all of the buttons and elements plugged in, and as many of them actually like wired up to functions as I can and wired up to actual game data. So we have most of that done. There's still not a whole lot you can do yet, but we at least see the data. So when the backend is ready for us, we can show it. So now I'm just going, and I pulled in my husband's latest MR, and things went awry because this was a bug fix to fix when you open up when you press escape, you'll get like the in-game menu, and it allows you to exit a game. This was just making sure that that actually works and doesn't crash. But I renamed the UI manager from UI.so. Oh. That's why everything is so broken here. This is very awry. So I renamed UI manager, or UI.cpp into UI manager.cpp. And now we have both. So I want to delete you. Okay, so main menu gets the mode set correctly. Play, class selection, okay. And you guys are all wired up to the UI manager, so that should be, whoa, that should be good. So the bug I'm trying to deduce now is why when I hit escape in my game UI or game scene, it is not triggering the in-game menu to appear. I also love and hate C++ peanut celery. And peanut celery says, to be fair, it has 3 languages inside of it: C, C++, 11 and below, C++, 17 and above. So Scott Myers talks about 14, and 14 predates me when I was paying attention to C++. What's the deal with, so is it that, I think he says C++ 11 and 14 are essentially like the same update, and then C++ 17 and above is why it's categorized as that. But can you shed some light on that, peanut celery? I'm curious by that. And add 1340 YT says, Nightcrawler games, do you like spinning? It depends on how much spinning and what kind of spinning you mean. I found that as I get older, I have less tolerance for spinning. I get dizzy. All right, let's see if this build. David Huffman, S1H says, evening. Hi, welcome to the stream. This is the type of bug that AI would be helpful with. Yes and no. So what this bug is it's a merge conflict. Oh, see? Ha! It's a merge conflict. And I feel like unless I had Claude in my repo, if I did, I could spin up a bunch of tokens and be like, Claude, look at this MR and then look at the current state of my repo and figure out what went wrong. But oh, see, it's working. But I feel like Claude doesn't do as well when it's like Git problems. And sometimes at work, when I'm asking Claude to go out and like, go look at this cloned repo that's already in a directory, it will go and say like, okay, I will go look at this directory that has a cloned copy of the repo. And then it'll like go and like go out to GitHub and then grab the repo and clone it down into a temp directory, even though I explicitly told it not to do that. So I feel like Claude is a little fuzzy on Git and like repos and where they are and navigating the source your directory appropriately. So I feel like it might have actually done not as great here, but we'll never know, will we? What I found Claude is really good at is like, hey Claude, I drew 2 copies of the same toolbar. Like, can you figure out where in my source code, even if you don't even know it's in this file, it can be like, oh yeah, right here. You reference the same panel dimensions in 2 spots. It's really good at like things that might be really hard to see if you've been looking at it for 100 years because you've memorized the shape of the code in your mind and now you can't notice anything wrong with it. The current forms of AI that use stolen data should be avoided if you don't want cognitive atrophy. I found that I don't know if I mean it in the way that you mean it, but for sure, the only way that I feel like I'm really improving is by doing this and like keeping Claude out of the equation. Unless like I'll use ChatGPT for Japanese practice, and that's a different story. So if I used, and I was telling this to someone on a previous stream, but I expect if I used Claude for learning in the sense that I used in the same way that I use Japanese for learning, if I were to, here's an example. If I were to say like, Claude, write me a letter that I can give to my host families to tell them I'm coming to visit in November, which is, I think, equated to like, Claude, help me design a UI that has X amount of buttons and behavior. I'm not going to learn anything in that situation. But if I were to interact with Claude and say like, Claude, how do I say, it's been such a long time, I'm really looking forward to seeing you, just to let you know I'm going in November, and if you come up with the Japanese for that on your own, and then you say like, Claude, did I make any mistakes? And they can say, yes, you did. And then you can say, Claude, like, what's the polite version of how to say this correctly? That's much more active than like just asking Claude to copy or give you something you can copy and paste, because there's no processing happening on your end. And in the first situation, we're just copying and pasting. Where I think learning comes from, I think that learning comes from the emotion that you get from being like, yes, I figured it out. And that's what makes things actually stick in your mind. And if you don't have the yes, I figured it out, you're just going to forget. That's my TED Talk for the day. I have not used Socratic mode, but I have heard about Socratic mode. It'll make you think about the problem. I feel like every day is Socratic mode with my son because he's 3. One thing, so corporate game designer says I've mostly used AI to do more complex transforms in data I've already created. I've asked it to put it in a CSV doc and forgot to save the file before sending it to the user. Yeah, in the year of our Lord 2026, I do not want to take an Excel spreadsheet and manually add a 1 to like the 3rd column, every 3rd column. Like, that's a very arbitrary example, but yeah, like, for sure. All right, so we are building and working. We have committed, so now we're going to work on our first test. I forgot. Always run your test before committing changes, y'all. This bites me more times than I would like to admit. It didn't bite me this time. Okay, so are the Is the game controller test building right now? Yeah, should be. Okay, so we want test F. And are you outside of? Yeah, you are. You're outside of. So test F, game controller test, and then let's pull up the game controller here. The only ones I don't need to test really any of these getters, because all it does is it goes out to game state, first checks to see if we have a valid instance, and then goes to get the game state out of the game instance and returns a specific subsection of game state. So I don't need to test those, but I do want to test some of these. So on hover, when we're hovering over elements, what we do is we have one string here, hovered info, and we set it to be whatever specific string we generate out of these element-specific hover methods. And what I really want to make sure of is that mGUI works every frame, so I do not want to be allocating a string every single frame that we are hovered on an attribute stat. So I put these guards in here, but that's what I want to test. Yeah, I think that using AI to review the code is a really good idea. I'm not currently doing that here, and mostly I have another thing. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I really rankle against having to pay someone to use AI. Not that I think it shouldn't be a paid service. I don't think it should be free. It's just that I have noticed cognitive atrophy when I rely too much on AI. And so then the natural way of things is, okay, well then everyone just uploads all of their thinking and their data processing of whatever project they're working on to AI. But you have to pay for that. So then that means that your creativity is now on a subscription service, just like every other goddamn thing that we have in our society. And I don't want my ability to create to be something I have to pay somebody for. And at work, I don't have to pay for the tokens. They're paying me to use AI. And so that's really cool. And it's a cool technology for sure. But this is neat because it doesn't matter unless someone comes in and just makes using MSVC a paid service, then I get to retain all of the things that I've learned about C++ so far. And so I get to continue to write using C++. Yeah, my brother-in-law just got his own GPU and he's running his own models on there. Oh, and then Toakor said, hey, just found your channel. Curious to know which project you are working on right now. Hey, welcome to the stream. I'm not a professional game developer. I am a professional SaaS desktop, legacy desktop developer in .NET. But we are working on a really quick elevator pitch. We're taking like retro dark fantasy and dungeon crawler vibe in the RPG experience, and we're taking deck builders and multiplayer deck builders like Dominion Online, and we are smashing them together so that we're squeezing all of the juice out of dungeon crawlers and compressing them into a 30-minute deck builder. So the idea is you'll still level up, you'll get equipment, you'll encounter monsters, you'll have to navigate through a dungeon, but you'll just do it in a really small amount of time with your friends. Okay, game controller test. Okay, first one we want to test is upper attribute stat. I feel like such a badass every time I use like make appropriate use of the control shift arrow keys to select, because I'm still such a mouse selector, you guys. I hope you all saw how smooth it was that I selected it. And Tokor said, and you're crafting your own engine, it seems? Yeah, we made our own engine in C++, and it is. I made an X post, but I saw somebody um, took a picture of Thomas the Train, and it said, "When you're a really useful engine," and it is so far has been a really useful engine for what we need to do. Carlos Ferreira says, "Welcome to the stream." Says, "You guys use something like Scrum or whatever because you and your stream in different days, of course, but I think the projects is always so well aligned." We do not use Scrum. I'll show you what we do. Because we are married, so we live in the same house. But that being said, we have surprisingly little time to talk about this stuff. So we communicate in Discord. And then we also keep this issue board really, really cleaned. So we try to be clear about like what needs to happen, what's the overview, what's the acceptance criteria. And so then we also tell each other what we're working on at any given time so that we know exactly what the other person's working on. All right, y'all, I did not make very much progress today. One day, I will either learn how to be more focused on stream, or I will pivot in the other direction and then just chat the whole time. I'm thinking golden path is I get into a habit of getting more dev work done on the stream while I'm doing programming. And then once I'm ready to do the art, it's much easier to chat and draw at the same time than it is to chat and think at the same time. So that's the golden path. But anyway, it's poker night for me. So it's a short stream tonight, and I've got to end it here, but I should be on maybe tomorrow, but probably Monday night around 7:30 Central. And hopefully by the love of God, I will be done with this MR by then. And we'll still be working on the UI. Next, I'm going to be working on the level up menu and the equipment menu, probably both in one stream.